Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's video is number 9 on my 30 days of reviewing one album per day in the genre of new age ambient related music albums from the 70s and 80s. So from one's from my childhood. Today's Roger Eno's debut album called Voices. So after in 1983, he was Roger Eno was on this legendary album with Daniel Lanois and of course his brother Brian Eno, Apollo Soundtracks. An amazing album and one that I'm looking forward to reviewing in the future. Just probably a stone cold classic. And here, Daniel and also Brian Eno uh, are back, but under Roger Eno's name by himself. So you can really kind of see how much Roger Eno really did contribute to Apollo. Because you can compare the two, and this album does sound like a version of Apollo. In many ways, as far as like the songs, they're almost there. Maybe not a spacey way. Maybe not as minimalism. Maybe not as much minimalism in there. There's a really nice feeling of aloneness and sort of which space music can give you, and I think that album really captures that particular mood really well. That there's kind of an aloneness in space, and some of the tracks on there are just amazing. And this is kind of not really even an evolving version of that, but I don't know if this sounds less spacey. Maybe it's just maybe more organic, or but the songs, they do remind you a lot of the songs on Apollo, and for the good and the bad. I think in some ways it's good. In some ways, I think the only opportunity I have for this album, what I wrote down, is maybe a little bit more variation on this album. Most of the tracks, once you kind of get to like track 8, 9, 10, 11, you're kind of feeling like, okay, we've been here, we've done this before. But there's a time in the record when you're like at 6, 7, 8 minutes, or 6, 7, 8 tracks in, where you're like, this is a beautiful album. So you kind of have a mix of that, and then maybe a little bit too much of. I don't know if that's always possible, but I do feel like you kind of get where the album's going, and maybe it doesn't become as deeper listening as Apollo does in some ways. But the sound of this is the first appearance on the channel for Roger Eno. As far as the sound, it's very peaceful. It's beautiful in many ways, like in Through the Blue or Recalling Winter or Reflections on IKB. Just some beautiful tracks. There's a bit of ominous in there, a bit of mysteriousness in the tracks like number 2, The Paler Sky, or Thinking Movie, the Thinking Movie Montage. When it comes to like Evening Tango, that track kind of gives me a movie montage kind of feel. Most of the tracks are piano led. It's usually like a simple piano, and then the song revolves around that, and it just kind of they stay fairly simple for the most part, but in that way they're kind of charming, and they're kind of whimsical. I wouldn't even say maybe whimsical, maybe more like I wouldn't say they're almost like little jingles, like bedtime jingles, but they do all have like a little bit of that kind of endearing, kind of childlike melody where it makes you feel it makes you reminisce, makes you think about your childhood and things like that, and because the songs they kind of, I wouldn't say they are basic, but they they feel so basic that they make you think about some of the most rudimentary parts of, and maybe the most basic or childlike experiences in your life. It's kind of that piano music that where it sounds like it doesn't really sound like a child piano or anything like that, but any kind of piano sound like this is going to kind of give you memories of a piano that you heard when you were a child or something like that. And this kind of does a little bit of that. There is some atmosphere on here. The atmosphere isn't as good as like Apollo or anything like that, but there's some good tracks on here that have some nice atmosphere that help it. A couple are a bit haunting, which is great. I wish there was a little bit more of that. There's some great. It's a great rainy night album. Like if you're reading a book or you're watching TV or you don't want to watch TV, you just want to sit alone and it's raining outside or it's a cold night outside, put on this album. It's a great listen to, and with lights off, it's very peaceful. I don't know if there's a hall or if it's a chorus or if it's an echo that's on most of the music, but it's a perfect amount to where it feels not like it's an echo of itself, but it almost sounds like a perfect balance, almost like two signals of the same sound, and it gives it it gives it this depth, which it sounds a little dreamlike to me. Yeah, as far as the tracks, Through the Blue, probably my favorite on the album, starts right off, 3 3/4 stars. A Paler Sky, 3 stars. Evening Tango, 2 3/4 stars. Recalling Winter, 3 1/4 stars. Voices, strangely enough, the title track is my least favorite. 2 stars. Still think it's a good track though. It's kind of the shortest track on the album too. The Old Dance, track number 6, 3 stars. Reflections on IKB, 3 1/4 stars. A Place in the Wilderness, 3 stars. The Day After, 2.5 stars. At the Water's Edge, 3 1/4 stars. And Great Promenade, 2.5 stars on that one. Not a fantastic ending with that track. I don't know if I would have ended it with that track myself. When I add up the stars, 32 1/4 stars divided by 11 is a 2.93. And I think that correlates really good. I can't necessarily give it much additional or taking away anything. It's pretty straightforward album. If you like Apollo by Eno, you're gonna like this album as well. Just doesn't really have the space or maybe as much melancholy as Apollo, and then also it doesn't have that kind of a lone feel that they perfected in that album. This has it's a little bit more new age than it is ambient, just a little bit more. Well, compared to everything else, it's definitely more new age than ambient, but compared to Apollo, it's a little bit more a new age than ambient on that. But yeah, really good album overall. Very solid. Can't necessarily say it's a very good album because it does get a little monotonous, and I kind of wish there was a little bit of variation, maybe a little bit more depth. But it's still a very enjoyable album for sure. You'd be hard pressed to find a album in the mid '80s that's mostly piano that's going to be much better than this. I can't imagine. I'm actually reviewing a couple coming up, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Roger Eno's album, 68 out of 100, called Voices. Excuse me. Curious if you have any thoughts on this album, or what would you rate this album out of 100? All right, thanks so much.